$2 million. That's the number people throw around like it settles the whole retirement conversation. For some people, it sounds impossibly low. For others, it sounds like more than enough to disappear from work forever. And that's exactly the problem. Most people hear $2 million and react emotionally before they do the one thing that actually matters. They never test it against real life. Because here's the truth. $2 million is not automatically rich, and it is not automatically safe. It is not a magic number. It is not a fantasy number. It is not even a useful number until you run it through the only filter that matters: your actual spending, your actual taxes, your actual retirement timing, and the income sources you already have waiting for you. That means the real question is not, is $2 million enough to retire? The real question is, enough for what? Enough to cover a quiet, comfortable life with a paid-off house and predictable expenses? Enough to fund travel, higher healthcare costs, and a more expensive lifestyle? Enough if you retire at 67? Enough if you want out at 57? Enough with Social Security? Enough without it for a decade? Same number, completely different answers. And that is where most retirement advice falls apart. Because people love round numbers. They love numbers that feel safe, numbers that sound impressive, numbers that remove the burden of thinking. But retirement does not care about your favorite round number. Retirement responds to math, clean math, honest math, unemotional math. So if you've had $2 million in your head as the finish line, or if you've dismissed it as nowhere near enough, this is where that story changes. Because once you stop guessing and start calculating, one of two things happens. Either you realize $2 million is stronger than you thought, or you realize the number was never the point in the first place. The real problem is not whether $2 million sounds big or small. The real problem is that most people judge retirement with emotion, not math. Because no number means anything on its own. Not 1 million, not 2 million, not 5 million. What matters is whether that number can support your actual lifestyle, your actual timeline, your tax reality, and your income sources in retirement. So this is not a debate about whether $2 million is a lot of money. It is a question of whether $2 million works on paper for the life you plan to live. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to take that $2 million number and test it against real retirement math. Not wishful thinking, not fear, not vague advice designed to sound safe. Just the actual mechanics: spending, taxes, Social Security, timing, and the rate your portfolio needs to support. Because the gap between what people think retirement costs and what their life actually costs is often massive. I know someone with several million invested who lives far more simply than most people would guess. Nice home, comfortable routine, regular travel, no financial stress, but nothing close to the extravagant life people imagine when they hear a big net worth. Then you have someone else with a far more ordinary portfolio, convinced they need double or triple what the math says, even though they have never sat down and mapped their real spending. That contrast is the whole story. A lot of people are chasing retirement numbers that were never built from their own life. They inherited the number from the internet, from headlines, from fear, from other people's standards, and then started organizing their future around it. So here's the framework I want you to hold on to through this entire video: a thermostat. When the room is freezing, every degree matters. When the room reaches a comfortable level, life works. You relax. You stop thinking about it. But once the room is already warm enough, turning the thermostat higher does not improve your life in any meaningful way. It just creates extra heat you do not need. That is how retirement planning works for a lot of people. They are not trying to get from cold to comfortable anymore. They are standing in a room that is already warm, still turning the dial, because the feeling of enough never arrived. And that's what is broken in the way most people think about retirement. The problem is not that people have zero information. The problem is that they are starting from bad assumptions. They pick a giant round number first and only later try to justify it. They treat safety like a mood instead of a calculation. And once fear gets mixed into the process, the target starts drifting upward almost automatically. Real retirement cost does not come from a dramatic number that sounds impressive. It comes from your lifestyle, what you spend, what you owe, what income still comes in, what taxes take out. That is where the real number lives. And once you understand that, something else becomes obvious. Spending does rise with wealth, but only up to a point. People with more money buy nicer versions of the same life, better trips, better seats, better neighborhoods, better margin for convenience. But daily life does not expand forever. At some point, extra money stops changing the experience in a serious way. The thermostat is already set where it needs to be. That reminds me of a woman who spent years building a successful business and eventually sold it. After the sale, she was told she needed far more invested before she could safely retire. And instead of nodding along, she asked one simple question. What exactly does the bigger number allow me to do that my current number does not? That question exposed everything. The answer she got was full of soft language, more flexibility, more security, more cushion, but nothing concrete. No one could point to a single part of her day-to-day life that the extra millions would actually improve. And once she saw that, the weakness in the advice became impossible to ignore. This is also where the conversation gets uncomfortable, because larger retirement targets do not appear out of nowhere. In a lot of cases, bigger numbers are encouraged because bigger numbers keep people saving, waiting, accumulating, and staying uncertain. Fear is useful in that system. A person who thinks they are always one more milestone away from safety is a person who keeps playing the game longer. So the real reversal here is simple. You are not automatically behind just because you have not hit the number in your head. There is a very good chance the number in your head was wrong from the beginning. And before we get into the math, take a second to subscribe if this kind of breakdown is useful to you, because the next part is where this stops being a conversation of opinions and turns into something much more useful. Let's run a realistic scenario. Take a married couple retiring at full retirement age. They want to spend about $110,000 a year after tax. Not a luxury yacht lifestyle, just a solid, comfortable retirement with room to travel, eat well, handle health care, and enjoy their time. Let's say their combined Social Security brings in about $50,000 a year. To support the rest, their portfolio needs to fill the gap. Now add taxes and assume they need roughly $90,000 a year from investments on a gross basis. At a withdrawal rate around 4.5%, that puts the portfolio requirement right around $2 million. That's the first thing a lot of people miss. In a very normal, very comfortable retirement setup, $2 million works. Not magically, not universally, but mathematically, yes, it works. Now let's raise the lifestyle and see what happens. Let's say the same couple wants closer to $160,000 a year after tax. More travel, higher recurring expenses, more discretionary spending, more room for everything. Keep Social Security in the picture, and now the portfolio has to do a lot more of the heavy lifting. In that case, the required number rises fast. Now you're no longer talking about $2 million. You're talking about something meaningfully higher. And that matters because it keeps this discussion honest. The point is not that $2 million is enough for everyone. The point is that retirement only gets clearer when you stop treating all lifestyles as if they require the same number. This is also why withdrawal rules get misunderstood. A lot of people hear one withdrawal rate, memorize it, and treat it like some fixed law of nature. But retirement math does not work like that. The rate depends on timing, flexibility, portfolio structure, income floors, and how long the money needs to do its job. It is not one number floating in space. It is part of an entire plan. And that brings me to someone like David. David is in his early 50s. He has saved diligently for years. His spending is controlled. His housing costs are manageable.
His portfolio is already strong enough that retirement is no longer a fantasy. But every time he gets close to his goal, the goal moves. First, he wanted $2 million, then it became $2.5 million, then $3 million. Not because his future got more expensive, but because he still doesn't feel safe. That's where this stops being a math problem. At some point, the numbers are no longer the issue. The issue is fear. The issue is uncertainty. The issue is that the brain adapts to every new milestone and immediately looks for the next one. What felt like freedom last year becomes not quite enough this year. And that matters even more when the conversation turns to retiring early.
Because early retirement changes the structure of the plan, not just the total. If you stop working before Social Security begins, you are not solving one giant problem with one giant pile of money. You are solving two different problems across two different time periods. One part of the money covers the earlier stretch. The other part supports the long-term retirement years after guaranteed income starts. That distinction changes everything. Think of it as two jobs inside one retirement plan. The first pool exists to carry you from retirement day to the point where Social Security starts. That money has a shorter assignment. The second pool exists to support the decades after that. Longer horizon, different role, different expectations. Now let's put numbers to that. Imagine someone planning to retire before traditional retirement age with a solid portfolio and moderate spending. Instead of assuming they need some giant all-purpose number, they separate the plan into those two timelines. The first part covers the bridge years. The second part remains invested longer and does not need to be leaned on immediately. Once you do that, the number required for early retirement often looks far less intimidating than people expect. That is why so many people overestimate what early retirement demands. They are applying one flat, overly conservative rule to money serving completely different purposes. Now go back to David. When you run his actual spending, his actual timeline, and his future income sources, the picture changes fast. The number that feels emotionally safe to him and the number that works mathematically are not the same. And once that becomes clear, the question is no longer, can he retire? The question becomes, why is he still telling himself he can't? This is where behavioral economics explains a lot. People do not simply want enough money, they want the feeling that enough money is supposed to create. And the problem is that the feeling does not reliably show up just because the portfolio crosses a certain line. The brain resets. The new level becomes normal. The target shifts again. So the deeper question is not really how much do I need? It is what kind of life am I trying to fund? Because if you cannot answer that, no number will ever feel final. You will keep increasing the target because the portfolio is covering for a lack of clarity. The money becomes a substitute for the harder question. And there's a real cost to that. Working extra years for the wrong target does not just mean earning more. It means giving up healthy years, flexible years, energetic years, years when you can still travel easily, move freely, and use your time the way you imagined. A retirement delayed by fear is not a harmless delay. It's a trade, and a lot of people are making that trade without realizing it. So if you take only 3 things from this, let them be these. First, know what you actually spend. Not what you guess, not what you think sounds responsible, what you actually spend. Second, know your real Social Security estimate. Your actual number matters a lot more than people think. Third, structure retirement money according to time and function instead of treating it like one undifferentiated pile. Because once you do that, the math starts getting clearer. And when the math gets clearer, something else becomes possible. You can finally see whether the thermostat is already set at a comfortable level. That's the whole point. The hardest part is not always building the portfolio. For a lot of people, the hardest part is recognizing when the system is already working. Because once you see that, the question changes. Not how much bigger can the number get, but how much of my life am I willing to spend chasing a number that was never really mine to begin with?